They thought he was just another weak old man. Gray hair, quiet eyes, and a limp that made him look harmless. So when a young prison bully decided to turn the hose on him, laughing while the cold water blasted across his face, no one expected the old-timer to even fight back. But what that bully didn't know was that this man once made a living breaking ribs in the ring. A trained kickboxer, one who'd fought his way through blood, sweat, and screaming crowds. And the moment he wiped the water from his eyes, the entire cell block would learn exactly who they were messing with. Stay with me until the end, because when the guards finally checked his file, they realized this frail old inmate wasn't supposed to be in any regular prison. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The morning sun barely crept through the narrow windows of Riverside Correctional when Adam shuffled into the yard for the first time. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame, and that limp in his left leg made every step look like a struggle. 67 years old, shoulders slightly hunched, moving like a man who'd seen too many battles and lost most of them. The other inmates watched him with the kind of cold curiosity reserved for fresh meat. Some whispered, others just stared, but all of them came to the same conclusion. Easy target. Adam found a spot near the far wall, away from the main crowd. He leaned against the concrete, closed his eyes, and let the morning air fill his lungs. The noise around him was familiar. Shouting, laughter, the clang of weights hitting metal. It reminded him of another life, another time when crowds would roar his name and money changed hands based on how hard he could hit. But that was decades ago. Now he was just another number in the system, another old man counting down the days. Marcus Thompson noticed him immediately. 26 years old, built like a truck, covered in tattoos that told stories of violence and pride. Marcus ran the yard like his own personal kingdom, and new inmates meant new opportunities to establish dominance. He nudged his crew, 3 younger guys who followed him around like hungry dogs waiting for scraps. "Look at Grandpa over there," he said, his voice carrying just loud enough for others to hear. "Looks like he can barely stand up." The crew laughed on cue. Marcus thrived on that sound, the way it made him feel powerful. He'd been locked up for 3 years now, assault charges that should have been attempted murder if the victim hadn't been too scared to testify. In here, respect was everything, and respect came from fear. The old man represented something Marcus couldn't stand: weakness. Adam opened his eyes slowly, scanning the yard with the patience of someone who'd learned to read danger long before it arrived. He saw Marcus watching him, saw the calculation in those cold eyes. He'd seen that look before, in rings, where men sized each other up before trying to destroy one another. But this wasn't a ring, and Adam wasn't the same man who used to dance between the ropes. Or was he? The first few days passed quietly. Adam kept to himself, ate his meals alone, and spent most of his free time in the library reading books about history and philosophy. The other inmates started calling him Professor behind his back, not out of respect, but mockery. He moved through the prison like a ghost, present but invisible, there but not really threatening anyone's position in the hierarchy. Marcus grew more irritated with each passing day. The old man's calm bothered him in ways he couldn't explain. When Marcus flexed his authority, Adam didn't flinch. When he made loud jokes about age and weakness, Adam didn't react. It was like the old man existed in a different world, one where Marcus's power meant nothing. That couldn't stand. On Thursday morning, during yard time, Marcus decided to make his move. The maintenance crew had left a hose connected near the shower building, the kind used to clean the concrete after fights or other incidents. The water pressure was strong enough to knock a man down if aimed right. Marcus saw his opportunity. He strolled over to where Adam sat on a concrete bench, reading a worn paperback book. The title was faded, but it looked like something about boxing history. How fitting, Marcus thought, grinning to himself. Time to give the old man a real history lesson. "Hey, Professor," Marcus called out, his voice echoing across the yard. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Everyone knew that tone. Something was about to happen. Adam looked up slowly, his dark eyes meeting Marcus's stare without fear or anger. Just acknowledgement. "You've been here almost a week now," Marcus continued, walking closer. "Haven't seen you talk to nobody? Haven't seen you pay your respects. You think you're better than us?" Adam closed his book carefully, placing it beside him on the bench. "I think I'm here, same as you," he said quietly. His voice carried a weight that made some of the watching inmates lean forward to hear better. Marcus laughed, but it came out forced. "Same as me? Old man, you don't know nothing about being the same as me. You're soft. You're weak. And in here, weak don't survive long." The crowd was growing now, sensing blood in the water. Even some of the guards had stopped their patrols to watch from a distance, close enough to intervene if things got too serious, but far enough away to let the natural order play out. This was prison politics at its most basic level. Adam stood up slowly, his limp more pronounced as he put weight on his left leg. That old injury, a reminder of his last professional fight 32 years ago, when a younger, hungrier fighter had landed a kick that shattered his kneecap and ended his career in one brutal moment. But as he straightened to his full height, something shifted in his posture. His shoulders squared. His breathing deepened. For just a second, the old man disappeared and something else took his place. Marcus saw it too, that subtle change, but he was too committed to the performance now. His crew was watching. The whole yard was watching, and backing down would mean losing everything he'd built. He walked over to the hose, testing the weight of it in his hands. The nozzle was heavy, metal, designed for industrial use. "You know what, Professor?" Marcus said, his grin spreading wider. "You look a little dusty. Maybe you need a shower." The first blast of water hit Adam square in the chest. The pressure was tremendous, designed to clear debris and grime from concrete surfaces. It should have knocked him backward, should have sent him sprawling onto the ground, while Marcus and his crew laughed. But Adam didn't fall. He absorbed the impact. His feet planted firm, water cascading down his jumpsuit and pooling at his feet. Marcus's grin faltered for just a moment before returning. The old man was tougher than he looked, but everyone had a breaking point. He adjusted his aim, sending the next stream directly at Adam's face, the water hitting with enough force to blur vision and steal breath. Still, Adam remained standing. Water dripped from his gray hair, ran down his weathered face, but his eyes never left Marcus. There was something in those eyes now that made the younger man's stomach tighten. Not anger, not fear, but recognition. Like Adam was remembering something he'd forgotten for a very long time. The yard had gone completely silent except for the sound of rushing water and Marcus's heavy breathing. Even his crew had stopped laughing, sensing that something had shifted in the dynamic. The old man wasn't reacting the way victims were supposed to react. Marcus cranked the water pressure higher, the hose bucking in his hands like a wild animal. The stream became a weapon, pounding against Adam's chest with enough force to bruise ribs. But the old man just stood there, water streaming from his face, his breathing steady and controlled. The silence in the yard was deafening now. Even the guards had moved closer, sensing something they couldn't quite name. That's when Marcus made his first mistake. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, thinking proximity would make the humiliation more complete. But Adam had spent decades reading distance, measuring space between bodies, calculating angles of attack. His eyes tracked Marcus's movement with the precision of a predator watching prey. The hose suddenly felt heavier in Marcus's hands. His arms were starting to ache from the pressure, and sweat mixed with the spray bouncing back at him. He lowered the stream for just a moment, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. In that split second of distraction, Adam moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. A single step forward, his weight shifting from his injured leg to his good one. His left hand swept up in a fluid motion, deflecting the hose nozzle away from his body. The water stream arced harmlessly into the air, creating a brief rainbow in the morning sun. Marcus stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden movement. The old man hadn't just blocked the water, he'd redirected it with the kind of economy of motion that spoke of years of training. But Marcus was young, strong, and angry. He swung the heavy metal nozzle at Adam's head, putting his full body weight behind the strike. Adam ducked under the swing with surprising grace for someone his age, the nozzle whistling through the air inches above his gray hair. As Marcus's momentum carried him forward, Adam's right hand shot out in a short, sharp jab that connected with the younger man's solar plexus. The impact was clean, precise, and devastating. Marcus gasped, the air driven from his lungs as he doubled over. The hose fell from his hands, water spraying wildly across the concrete. For 30 seconds, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but struggle for air while his crew watched in stunned silence. The yard erupted. Inmates who had been placing quiet bets on how long the old man would last were now shouting encouragement. Others pulled out makeshift phones, trying to capture what was happening. The guards started moving, but something made them hesitate. This wasn't the usual prison violence. This was something else entirely. Adam straightened slowly, his limp more pronounced now from the sudden movement. He looked down at Marcus, who was still bent over, hands on his knees, fighting for breath. There was no malice in the old man's eyes, no triumph, just a kind of sad recognition, like he'd seen this story play out 100 times before. When Marcus finally caught his breath, rage replaced the fear in his eyes. He charged forward with both fists swinging, throwing wild haymakers that would have flattened most men his age. But Adam wasn't most men. He slipped the first punch by inches, his head moving just enough to let the fist pass by his ear. The second punch he caught on his forearm, the impact solid but absorbed. Then Adam did something that made every person in that yard stop and stare. He smiled. Not a cruel smile, not mocking, but the smile of a man remembering what he used to be. His stance shifted slightly. His weight balanced between both feet despite the injured leg. His hands came up in a guard position that looked casual but spoke of decades of muscle memory. Marcus threw another punch, this one aimed at Adam's ribs. The old man's left hand came down in a perfect parry, deflecting the blow while his right hand snapped forward in a counterpunch that caught Marcus on the jaw. The younger man's head snapped back, and for a moment, his eyes went unfocused. The crew finally decided to jump in. 3 young men, each one desperate to prove their loyalty to Marcus and their own toughness. They came at Adam from different angles, thinking numbers would overwhelm an old man who could barely walk straight. They were wrong. Adam's movement became fluid, economical, each motion serving multiple purposes. He stepped left to avoid one attacker while throwing an elbow that caught another in the ribs. His injured leg became a weapon, sweeping the feet of the third man and sending him crashing to the concrete. The years melted away as muscle memory took over, and suddenly the yard wasn't seeing a frail old inmate anymore. They were watching a fighter. The first crew member came back at him, swinging a crude shiv made from a sharpened toothbrush handle. Adam's hand shot out like lightning, catching the attacker's wrist and twisting it in a move that made the weapon clatter to the ground. A sharp knee strike to the ribs followed, and the young man crumpled. Marcus was back on his feet now, blood trickling from his split lip, his pride wounded worse than his body. He grabbed a weight from the exercise area, a 25-pound plate that he hefted like a shield and weapon combined. The crowd backed away, sensing the violence was escalating beyond simple dominance games. But Adam didn't retreat. Instead, he did something that stunned everyone watching. He began to bounce lightly on the balls of his feet, his limp completely gone now, replaced by the fluid footwork of a trained boxer. His hands moved in small circles, and his breathing became rhythmic, controlled. Marcus charged with the weight plate raised above his head, intending to bring it down with crushing force. Adam waited until the last possible second, then stepped aside with a fighter's timing. As Marcus stumbled past, overcommitted to his attack, Adam's right hand came up in an uppercut that connected cleanly with the younger man's chin. The impact was precise, calculated, and final. Marcus's eyes rolled back as his knees buckled. The weight plate fell harmlessly to the side as he collapsed onto the concrete, unconscious before he hit the ground. The yard fell completely silent. Even the guards had stopped moving, transfixed by what they'd witnessed. The old man, who could barely walk, had just systematically dismantled 4 younger, stronger opponents without breaking a sweat. Adam stood over Marcus's unconscious form, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The limp was back now, the adrenaline fading, but something had changed in his posture. He looked around the yard at the faces staring back at him and saw fear where there had been mockery before. One of the guards finally found his voice. He keyed his radio with shaking hands and spoke words that would echo through the prison system for weeks to come. "We need medical in the yard, and we need to pull Adam Washington's file. Something doesn't add up here." As the medical team rushed to tend to Marcus and his crew, other inmates began to whisper among themselves. Stories started spreading, theories about who the old man really was and why his hands moved like weapons. But Adam just picked up his book from where it had fallen and limped slowly back toward the building, leaving behind a yard full of questions and a reputation that would follow him for the rest of his sentence. The warden's office felt different that afternoon. Captain Rodriguez had been running Riverside Correctional for 12 years, and he'd seen every kind of inmate walk through those gates. Gang leaders, serial killers, white-collar criminals who thought they were better than everyone else. But he'd never had a file like this one land on his desk. Adam Washington, 67 years old, serving 18 months for tax evasion, should have been processed into minimum security, maybe even work release. Instead, someone in processing had made an error that was about to change everything. Rodriguez stared at the documents spread across his desk, his coffee growing cold as he read through Adam's real history. Professional kickboxer, 43 wins, 7 losses, 2 draws, fought under the name Iron Adam from 1978 to 1991. Military background, special forces, 3 tours overseas in places that were still classified. The file was thick, filled with commendations, incident reports, and medical records that painted a picture of a man who had lived several lifetimes worth of violence. The medical section made Rodriguez's stomach turn. 17 documented concussions, multiple fractures in both hands from years of striking without proper protection, reconstructive surgery on his left knee after what the report called catastrophic combat injury during classified operation. The limp wasn't from age. It was from a war most people didn't even know existed, but it was the psychological evaluation that made the warden's hands shake slightly as he turned the pages. Post-traumatic stress disorder, controlled through years of therapy and medication. Potential for extreme violence when threatened or cornered. Recommendation for specialized housing and careful monitoring. The report was dated 3 months ago, just before Adam's sentencing. Rodriguez picked up his phone and dialed the medical wing. Dr. Sarah Chen had been the prison psychologist for 8 years, and she'd evaluated Adam during his intake. Her voice was calm but concerned when she answered. "Doctor, I need you to look at Adam Washington's file again," Rodriguez said without preamble. "The real file, not the summary we got from processing." There was silence on the other end for a long moment. "Captain, I only received a basic intake form. Tax evasion, elderly inmate, standard processing. Are you telling me there's more?" Rodriguez rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. "Doctor, this man is a trained killer. Military special operations. Professional fighter for over a decade. Someone screwed up big time, and now we've got a weapon walking around general population. The implications hit both of them at the same time. Adam had been in general population for a week. A week of being sized up by predators who saw only weakness. A week of building tension that could have exploded at any moment, and now it had. The incident report from the yard was sitting right next to Adam's file. 4 inmates hospitalized. Marcus Thompson with a concussion and possible jaw fracture. His 3 associates with various injuries ranging from broken ribs to severe bruising. The guards who witnessed it described something they'd never seen before. Clinical precision, controlled violence. A 67-year-old man moving like someone half his age. Dr. Chen's voice came through the phone, tight with concern. "Captain, we need to pull him from general population immediately. If he's been hiding his capabilities, there's no telling what kind of psychological pressure he's been under. Men like that, when they finally break, the results can be catastrophic." Rodriguez was already reaching for his radio when his office door burst open. Officer Martinez, one of his most experienced guards, stood in the doorway with sweat beading on his forehead and panic in his eyes. "Sir, we have a situation in Cell Block C. It's Washington." The walk to Cell Block C felt like a funeral march. Rodriguez's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Had Adam finally snapped completely? Were there more injured inmates? The corridor was unusually quiet, that kind of silence that meant everyone was holding their breath and waiting for something terrible to happen. Adam's cell was at the end of the block, a single occupancy unit that had been his home for the past week. As they approached, Rodriguez could see other inmates pressed against their cell bars, straining to see what was happening. Their faces showed a mix of fear and fascination that made his skin crawl. The cell door was open. Inside, Adam sat on his narrow bunk, hands folded in his lap, staring at the wall with those same quiet eyes that had fooled everyone into thinking he was harmless. But now Rodriguez saw them differently. They weren't the eyes of a weak old man. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, done too much, and was struggling to keep it all buried. Officer Martinez gestured toward the small desk in the corner of the cell. On it sat a stack of letters, each one bearing the seal of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Medical appointment reminders, therapy session notifications, prescription renewals for medications that Adam hadn't received since entering the prison system. "Sir," Martinez said quietly, "he asked me to give these to you. Said you'd understand once you read his real file." Adam's voice was soft when he finally spoke, still staring at that blank wall. "I tried to tell them during intake, told them there'd been a mistake, but nobody listens to an old man with a limp." He turned slowly to face Rodriguez, and the warden saw something in those eyes that made him step back involuntarily. "I've been off my medication for 8 days now. The dreams are coming back." Rodriguez felt his mouth go dry. What kind of dreams? The kind where I'm not in a prison cell. The kind where people are shooting at me and I have to shoot back. The kind where I wake up thinking I need to eliminate threats before they eliminate me. Adam's voice remained calm, controlled, but there was an undercurrent of something dangerous. Today in the yard, for about 5 minutes, I forgot where I was, forgot when I was. All I knew was that someone was attacking me, and I needed to survive. Dr. Chen had arrived and was standing in the doorway, her face pale as she listened. She stepped forward slowly, her training kicking in as she assessed the situation. "Adam, I'm Dr. Chen. Can you tell me how you're feeling right now?" Adam's laugh was dry, humorless. "How am I feeling? I'm feeling like a man who spent 30 years learning to kill people efficiently, followed by another 30 years learning how not to. And now I'm in a place where all those old instincts are useful again." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Rodriguez could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Around them, the other inmates had gone completely quiet, sensing the gravity of what was happening even if they didn't understand it. Dr. Chen took another careful step into the cell. "The medications you're supposed to be taking, they help with the flashbacks?" Adam nodded slowly, among other things. "Without them, the line between past and present gets blurry. When that boy came at me with the hose today, I wasn't seeing a prison bully. I was seeing enemy combatants, people who wanted to hurt me, and who I needed to stop before they succeeded. Rodriguez found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. Adam, are you saying you're a danger to the other inmates? Adam was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the same careful deliberation he seemed to bring to everything. Captain, I'm saying that I'm a danger to anyone who threatens me while I'm in this state. That boy today was lucky. I held back. But if these episodes get worse, if I have a full flashback episode, I might not be able to control what happens next. The weight of responsibility settled on Rodriguez's shoulders like a physical burden. He had 800 inmates in this facility, and he'd just learned that one of them was essentially a loaded weapon with a malfunctioning safety mechanism. The liability alone could destroy his career, but more importantly, people could die. Dr. Chen was taking notes on a small pad, her clinical training warring with obvious concern. Adam, have you experienced any other symptoms? Paranoia, hypervigilance, sleep disturbances? All of the above, Adam replied. I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since I got here. Every sound in this place could be a threat. Every face could be an enemy. When you've lived in places where that was actually true, it's hard to turn off that mindset. Martinez shifted nervously beside Rodriguez. Sir, what do we do? We can't put him in solitary, not with his medical conditions, but we can't leave him in general population either. Adam stood up slowly, his movement careful and deliberate. There was no trace of the limp now, no sign of the frail old man who had shuffled into the yard that morning. The medication didn't just treat my psychological symptoms, he said quietly. It also managed the chronic pain from my old injuries. Without it, my body remembers what it used to be capable of. He walked to the small mirror mounted on the wall and stared at his reflection. For 30 years, I've been taking pills to forget how to be the man I used to be. Now those pills are gone, and that man is waking up. The question isn't whether I'm dangerous. The question is how long I can keep him under control. Rodriguez made his decision. We're moving you to protective custody immediately. Medical isolation, until we can get your medications sorted out and figure out how this happened. Adam turned back to them, and for just a moment, Rodriguez saw a flicker of relief cross his weathered features. That would be wise, he said simply, because the dreams aren't just getting stronger, they're getting more real. And in them, I'm not the victim anymore. As the guards prepared to escort Adam to the medical wing, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were all missing something important. The old man had taken down 4 younger inmates without breaking a sweat, but he'd also shown remarkable restraint. He could have killed them all, probably without much effort. Instead, he'd used just enough force to end the threat. That level of control, even in a compromised mental state, spoke to training that went far deeper than anything in his file. Rodriguez made a mental note to make some calls, reach out to contacts in military intelligence. Something told him that Adam Washington's real story was just beginning to surface. The medical wing of Riverside Correctional was quieter than the main blocks, designed for inmates who needed specialized care or isolation for their own protection. As Adam was processed into his new cell, a single room with 24-hour medical monitoring, Rodriguez watched through the observation window. The old man moved around the small space with economic precision, checking sight lines, testing the strength of fixtures, unconsciously cataloging everything that could be used as a weapon or tool. It wasn't paranoia. It was professional assessment, the kind of systematic evaluation that special operations personnel never really stopped doing. Dr. Chen joined him at the observation window, her clipboard thick with notes from their conversation. Captain, I've been thinking about what he said, about holding back during the fight. That suggests his training includes graduated response protocols. Rodriguez frowned. Meaning? Meaning he's not just a trained killer. He's a trained killer with discipline. Someone taught him not just how to eliminate threats, but how to calibrate his response based on the level of danger. That's advanced military training, probably counterterrorism or special operations. The implications were staggering. Rodriguez had been assuming they were dealing with a veteran who had snapped under pressure, but if Dr. Chen was right, they were dealing with something much more complex. A man who was still operating under military protocols, even while experiencing psychological breakdown. Adam had settled onto his narrow bunk and was staring at the ceiling with that same distant expression. But his breathing was controlled, rhythmic, like someone practicing meditation or mental exercises. Even in crisis, he was maintaining discipline. Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. "Captain, this is Officer Johnson in the infirmary. You need to get down here. The inmates from the yard incident are talking." The infirmary smelled of disinfectant and fear. Marcus lay on a narrow medical cot, his jaw wired shut, speaking through gritted teeth to anyone who would listen. His 3 crew members occupied the beds around him, each one sporting injuries that told the same impossible story. Rodriguez entered the sterile room with Dr. Chen close behind. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the injured inmates. Marcus's eyes locked onto the warden immediately, burning with a mixture of rage and something that looked disturbingly like respect. Officer Johnson approached them, his voice low and urgent. "Sir, they've been talking nonstop since they woke up. About Washington. About what they saw out there." Marcus struggled to sit up despite the protests from the medical staff. His words came out slurred but determined. "Warden, that old man ain't normal. The way he moved, the way he hit, it was like watching a machine work." Rodriguez pulled up a chair beside the bed. "Tell me exactly what happened out there, Marcus." The young inmate's eyes grew distant, like he was reliving something that didn't quite make sense to him. "I've been fighting my whole life, man. On the streets, in juvie, in here. I know what it looks like when someone gets lucky, when they catch you off guard. This wasn't that." One of the crew members, a kid named Rico with his arm in a sling, spoke up from across the room. "He knew we were coming before we even moved, like he could see the whole fight before it started." Marcus nodded painfully. "When I swung that hose nozzle at his head, he ducked like he'd seen it in slow motion. Then, when he hit me in the chest, it wasn't wild or angry. It was precise, professional." 3 weeks later, Adam was transferred to a federal facility designed for inmates with special circumstances. His medications were restored, his psychological care resumed, and the nightmares began to fade. The processing error that landed him in Riverside became the subject of a federal investigation, leading to policy changes across the prison system. Marcus recovered fully, but something had changed in him. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet respect for things he didn't understand. He never spoke about the fight again, but those who knew him said he'd learned the difference between being tough and being dangerous. Adam served his remaining sentence without incident, spending his days in the library and his evenings writing letters to other veterans struggling with their own demons. When he was released, he returned to his small apartment, his government checks, and his quiet life. But sometimes, late at night, he'd look at his reflection and see not the old man everyone expected, but the warrior he'd always been underneath. The lesson was clear. Never judge a book by its weathered cover, because some stories run deeper than anyone can imagine.